What kind of data did you collect?
Yeah, so I had various kinds of data. So I had the fatigue machine itself, which stored the force and the displacement and saved that to a file. So that output, I had measurements of the crack length. So I took photographs and then measured the crack from that. So that's kind of the raw data. And then I analyzed the data, did various calculations to derive certain physical properties that you can't measure directly from that data. So I also had those kind of derived data.
Did you share these data files that you produced? Yeah.
So all those raw data and the derived data, once I had a publication to go with it that made use of that data, I made sure that data was put on the 4TU data center. So that in principle anybody who wants can access that data. So they can, if they want to understand more of my papers, they can go to the raw data and really follow the steps I took. Or if they have their own models that they want to test or calibrate, they can use my data for that.
What were the advantages that you experienced from sharing your data?
Well, there have been a couple of things. I noticed during the peer review process that the peer reviewers use that data to kind of understand my paper better and gain more confidence in what I've done. It was also really convenient to share the data. There was an Italian researcher who contacted me, and he has a computer model, but he wants to check that model and calibrate it, see whether it reflects reality properly. So I could just send him one link with the DOI to the data center and say, well, here's my data, and you can download it and run it through your model and compare it to whatever you like, and just give me a citation at the end if it turns out to be useful. And I've also noticed there's a bit more exposure, people that also just look at my data. And it just gives a favorable impression. If you go to a conference and say, well, here's my data, do whatever you want with it, look at it if you don't believe my story as such, or use it for your own purposes. It's still quite uncommon to do that, so I notice that people are quite pleasantly surprised when they see that that my data is available.
So when you approached the 4TU data center, how did that go? Which process did you follow?
Yeah, well, I started off on the website, and there's of course a very useful form. You can really just go to the website, and then it's almost an automatic form you can fill in and upload your data. It's very easy. Of course, before that you need to think a bit because, well, people should be able to use that data without having to contact you, ideally. So they really need to understand, what everything is. So the first step for me was to kind of select all the data that went with the publication, that the publication was based on. Kind of just copy that all to a separate folder on my computer that I could really structure it in a way that not just works for my process and for me, but for everyone. So make sure that the file formats are basic, that you don't need special programs to read them. Make sure that there are headers, that all variables have the units attached to them. Is this number in millimeters or in meters or in kilometers? Added documentation, so a README file and explaining how the data was collected, all the other information you might want that's not in the data itself, the context around it. And once that's set up, I used the form on the 4TU data center website. And then you go through that, and then in that process you can either just upload immediately or you can pre-reserve a DOI. Yeah. So then you have a permanent link to the data. And then my process was I already had the paper basically written. I was just before submitting it to the journal. I submitted the data to the data center, I got my DOI, and I just updated the citation I already had to my data in the publication with that link. Yeah. So if you use any kind of reference manager, it's quite easy to update references. Yeah. And then the data was there, I had the link, and then uploaded the publication as well.
If you look at the process of sharing your data, and if you think about all the work that you invested in it, did it take a lot of time? Was it a complex thing to do, yes or no?
Well, it's a bit hard to quantify if it's a lot of time. I mean, it definitely takes some time and effort. You really have to structure your data so that other people can understand it. So you really have to, at least for me, you have to add documentation because the things that you just know or you have on a piece of paper somewhere that really have to be neatly structured in a README file or something with the data. So that takes some time and effort. You might have to convert file formats so that other people can use it. But I do think that's worth it in the end. It makes it easier to share your data with other people. It makes it easier if a couple of years later you want to use the data, you can say, oh, what did I do then? And you can just read it in your README file. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it definitely does take extra effort, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, and it costs you, let's say, I don't know, 1 day, 2 days, a week? And what range should I be thinking?
I think, well, it depends a lot on, of course, what your data is and how much you did beforehand when you were collecting the data, how much you already had in your mind. I think for me, like for a paper, to kind of get the data collected to go with it as a data set, about a day.